Hello, I'm Dr.
Hello, how
Shelley
are you?
Cooper. I'm good. How are you?
Just fine.
We are going to have just a nice little chat. What's up, Kansas City is the format or um, the way that we're going to be able to talk today is through the What's Up Kansas City model. I'm probably not saying that right, but I'll get it straight before. This is our first interview, in case you can't tell, but I'm Dr. Shelley Cooper, and I'm CEO and founder of Diversity Telehealth. We also offer a software platform through uh, Come On Now, and we have a 501c3 Diversity Telehealth Community Network. So today we will be speaking with Mrs. Faye Bynum Jacobs, and she's going to tell us her health story. And our conversation, the purpose of it is to educate, enlighten, and empower the listener and the community. Sorry, let me turn off my phone. So, Ms. Jacobs, Faye, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll just have a discussion.
Sure. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, but my health journey is through my son, really, who suffers from TTP, which is thrombocytopenia purpura, which is an autoimmune system disease. Now, my training is in mental health. However, working with Brian for the last 22 years, my health experience always goes through him. He was a normal kid. He was away at college and got the flu actually. And as we know, when you have the flu, your autoimmune system is compromised, and his was very much so. And he ended up with this disease. At that time, 22 years ago, it was very rare. One out of 500,000 people would get it. And his mortality rate, it was 6 months. But as I said, it has been 22 years since we have been caregivers for him. I guess what I would say is, yes, there are some resources available, but what we have found, those resources are available for those candidates who are born with developmental disabilities. Brian was not. As I say, he was a normal kid till he was 22 years old, had this stroke, had three strokes, as a matter of fact, then had a heart attack, and his life was cut short after then. Okay. So he has been living with us ever since then. And what we have found is that because of that, as I have talked about the organic brain syndrome, this is not into services in helping those young adults who are having a brain failure. That's the journey that we go through. And that was the journey we went through at 22 when he was 22, and the journey we are now going through as he is 46 years old. There are not enough services for young adults who are experiencing mental health issues. Um, and what do? You have to become the advocate for your child. And that's my advice to anyone who is living with someone with a disease. You have to take an active part in helping that person survive, to help that person have a quality life. Um, there has been very little support as a result of Brian having this disease at 21 or 22. We would have had lots of resources if, again, it was before 21 or 22, but it was not. And so we had to do the very best that we could in making sure that he had some services. And yes, it has been frustrating. Um, Yet through this illness, it has also taught my husband and I. I'm very lucky to have him as a partner in that we're in this together. And so I also would say you have to be strong, because having an illness like this can tear a relationship apart. Brian suffers from aphasia, both recessive and expressive, meaning that he hears what you say, but he cannot express it, even though he may have it in his brain, but his mouth will not form the words for you to say. So you have to guess what he's saying at all times. It's almost like 20 questions. As far as resources, I will say that, yeah, in the last 22 years, it has gotten somewhat better. Um, and I don't know if it's because of COVID, but we have been able to get some community support. That's what he needs. His life is his dad and I, and in this house. Again, because of the nature of his disease, because Brian is overweight, so we have to be very careful where he goes. I think if I, again, my word of advice is to become an advocate for anyone that you are taking care of. We had to go through churches. The state did not have a good program, again, because of that qualifier. It was not a developmental disease. It was something that happened to him when he was, to me, it's still a child because he was still in school. But these rules and regulations, and they don't bend, we couldn't get a lot of services. So we, had to pay out of pocket in getting someone to help him. And that's basically what we're having to do now. Now I'll go back to, because COVID, and again, because there's so many young folks out here now who are having some problems, it is opening up a little, and we are getting some community support. Just a little. I think we get about 5 hours a week to help us. But basically, that journey that we are going through is trying to make him as happy as he can be, because he still remembers his life before the stroke. And so then we have to deal with depression. We have to deal with making sure that his quality of life is the best that we can do. So we have to go out and search for services. But I will go back and say that it is getting better, again, because of COVID, and mental health services are beginning to expand, but it still has a long way to go.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And we've known each other several years, and I didn't know all of the intricacies of what you shared. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm sure it's frustrating not being able to provide for your child, no matter how old they are. They're still our children. Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned the name of his illness. Can you describe that again?
It's called TTP, and the, I guess, Latin term is thrombocytopenia purpura. Long word. And at that time, the time that Brian got it, it was so rare, people didn't know what to do with it. And it still is rare, but we are getting some good news, if not for him, but for other people who tend to get it. The lifespan has increased. As I said before, when Brian got it, 6 months was generally the lifespan of someone who caught this disease. And I always tell people that if you have the flu, take it very seriously, because it can go into other directions.
And that brings us to the next part of, you're educating us. And of course, education, enlightenment, and empowerment are the three goals of our talk today. So you educated us, enlighten us on how, and you touched on a couple of these, how you and your family have been able to still enjoy your son and enjoy his milestones. I think, and you mentioned in one of our conversations years ago that he had a setback and he had to really relearn everything. Can you enlighten us on how you were able to do that and what types of services, what types of either books or videos or whatever you use to bring him to where he is today, or how he got to where he is today?
Yeah, we went online and started doing some research because, as I said before, it wasn't a lot out there for us to research. And so again, I'll go back to you've got to be your own advocate. And so what we did, we started at the hospital. We As a result, then we had a support group because I think it was one other person here, and I live in Wilmington, North Carolina, that had it. And so we began doing our own research and just testing some places that might be able to serve him. It was a trial by error. Brian knows enough when you're being condescending to him.
Mhm.
And so he will retaliate with that very much so. So there are some anger issues with him and frustration with him because he knows what he wants to do. It is just hard uh, for that message, for him to give you that message. So you have to be patient, patient, patient in working with him. So when we go to agencies, we give them a full description of what it is like to communicate with him. We started out with some VTech tours, that communication skills. And so we started with that as a resource to get him to understand words. That was a problem at times because you could tell he knew the words, but he couldn't say them. And sometimes with the disease, he hears the message and it almost goes backwards. You know what I'm saying? So he has taught us so much about communicating, about communication. It is more than verbal, as we all know. This nonverbal cues can get you a long way in communicating with somebody.
And that's enlightening for us.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Mhm.
did you have another
Oh,
thought
no,
that you wanted to share?
that's okay.
So you've educated us from the beginning. As soon as you started telling your story, you educated us on this TTP has a 1.5 million chance of happening, and at least it was 22 years ago, with a 6-month life expectancy. And he's been blessed with an additional 22 years and going and still
Yeah.
going.
Mm-hmm.
You also mentioned being an advocate for your child and seeking or taking advantage of or making sure that you're able to have a strong partner.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about community support and knowing the rules and regulations and the different agencies in the neighborhood, in the community, online resources and research, support groups. So those you've educated, you've enlightened. How have you empowered your group? And when you tell others your story, or when you had a support group that was formed with another family that was going through the same thing, how did you empower them, and how have you been empowered?
I would say the respect of an individual. You you can do this. It is by no means easy, but your spirit, you can do this. And when you do, it is such a feeling of strength, such a feeling of resiliency that it's okay. We've done this together, you and I, and let the person who is ill in a part, let them be a part of this. This is their journey. You are partnering with them. And so give them the opportunity to have a say so, no matter what it is. Don't just assume, that because you don't. But you give them the power to come into this conversation and to come into this care plan. And therefore, it empowers you to do the best that you can do.
You're giving so many nuggets. I can't write as fast as you're is there any life lesson that you've learned that you were completely surprised by? You had no idea this could possibly happen, comparing what your journey from the beginning to now. What has been the biggest surprise for you?
That we are still standing. It's been, we have had lots of death door situations. What has surprised me is Brian's strength. What has surprised me is the lesson he has taught my husband and I. It's been a wonderful journey. It has been tiring, but it also has been joyous just to see that spirit that he has. You will deal with me as a person. I am a person, no matter what. And so I think that's the surprise, that he still has that desire to live, that desire to be here. I am here, and you will do, no matter how. And he has been really, we have had the priest come in. We are Catholics, and he has had the last rite 3 times. Wow. And we have had doctors say to us, I don't know who saved him, and we can say, oh, but we do. So there was a purpose for this, and I'm glad to witness that. That has surprised me. That I'm glad to. It took me a while to get to that, but there's a purpose, and we're going to live by that.
Well, you've definitely moved me in many ways in relation to your story. So I'd like to thank you for sharing your story, sharing your insight, educating us, enlightening us, and empowering the listeners that are going to be blessed by the story that you're sharing with us today. So on behalf of What's Up Kansas City, and I'm Dr. Shelley Cooper, and we have Miss Faye Bynum Jacobs with us from Wilmington, North Carolina, telling her story about Brian. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
The program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.